Flying aces. Who does not want to see something about flying aces? Hi, I am Indy Needell, and this is a World War II in real-time gallery special. We have not actually done one of these for several years, but I was at a bar in Stockholm, where I live, a couple of weeks ago, and a guy asked me why the World War II series never really covered the World War II flying aces the way I covered them with the Great War. And I did not have a good answer. So, here it is. Today, I am covering 5 German flying aces of World War II. Will there be more galleries like this covering more aces from other countries? I do not know that yet. Maybe. I should also point out that 103 Luftwaffe pilots were given credit for more than 100 victories. So do not think of this today as the full story of them. It is more like something to inspire you to get started, so you can go and learn about all the others. Where should we begin? Why not with Erich Hartmann, the highest-scoring ace of them all? Erich Alfred Hartmann was born on the 19th of April, 1922, in Weissach, Württemberg, into a Germany still shaken from defeat in the First World War. Flying came into his life early, too. His mother was one of Germany's first female glider pilots, and even started her own glider club in 1936. Of course, Hartmann learned to fly as a teenager, earning his glider license before he was even old enough to drive. By the time the Luftwaffe came calling in 1940, flying was already second nature to him. Hartmann's early career was uneven. He was punished again and again for poor flying judgment and overconfidence, traits that would later be shaped rather than removed. In 1942, he lost 2/3 of his pay for 3 months and was confined to quarters for a week after doing unauthorized aerobatics over Zerbst airfield. His story almost ends right here, but he may actually have unknowingly saved his own life with that sudden aerobatic display. In his own words, "I had been scheduled to go up on a gunnery flight the afternoon that I was confined. My roommate took the flight instead of me in an aircraft I had been scheduled to fly. Shortly after he took off, while on the way to the gunnery range, he developed engine trouble and had to crash land near the Hindenburg-Katowice Railroad. He was killed in the crash." After advanced fighter training, Hartmann was posted in late 1942 to Jagdgeschwader 52, the Luftwaffe's top fighter wing on the Eastern Front. It was here that he would spend almost all of his combat career mastering the Messerschmitt Bf 109. He struggled at first, though, including a terrible first mission where he panicked and left his squad leader, then mistook him for an enemy, and then finished it off by running out of fuel and crash landing. But under the guidance of experienced pilots, he followed a strict tactical rule. Get in close without being seen, fire at point-blank range, and break away at once. No aerobatics, no dogfighting if it could be avoided. His skill would come from surprise and timing, not flashy flying. Between November 1942 and May 1945, Hartmann was credited with 352 aerial victories, all but a few against Soviet aircraft. This is still the highest official score of any fighter pilot in history. It must be said, though, that Luftwaffe victory claims, especially music on the Eastern Front, are very open to overcounting, and his were likely overcounted too. Even so, historians widely agree that Hartmann's total was extremely high by any standard. Hartmann became known as the Blonde Knight of Germany, though he reportedly did not like the nickname. And inside the Luftwaffe, he was more often known as Bubi, meaning young boy, because of his baby face. In the final days of the war, Hartmann surrendered to the Americans, but under Allied agreements, he was handed over to the Soviets. He spent years in Soviet captivity, much of it in gulags, refusing repeated offers to join East Germany's Air Force. He was later released and moved to West Germany in 1955. Who is next? How about Isa Rudorfer? Unlike many other aces, Rudorfer did not grow up surrounded by aviation culture. He entered the Luftwaffe in the late 1930s and finished his flight training just as Europe slipped into open war, joining the fighter arm as a fairly normal young officer rather than a prodigy. Rudorfer's combat career began in the Battle of France in May 1940 with Jagdgeschwader Richthofen. His unit gave air cover for von Kleist's panzer forces moving through the Ardennes forest. It was also around then that he got his first confirmed kill, shooting down a Curtiss Hawk 75 on May 14th. These early operations were costly, and like many Luftwaffe pilots of the time, he faced a steep learning curve. He was shot down several times during the Western campaign and barely survived a number of fights. In fact, over his career, he would end up being shot down 16 times and ejecting 9 times. That means his reputation came a little more slowly built, through experience, small improvements, and just refusing to stay down, rather than quick success. And actually, here is a bit of trivia for you. If you ejected that many times in the post-war world, especially out-of-jet aircraft, there is almost no chance you would be allowed back into a cockpit. If you know why, post it in the comments. Anyway, after a painful and drawn-out start to his career in the battles of France and Britain, he was transferred to the Mediterranean theater in late 1942, just as the Allies began Operation Torch. By then, his unit had received some of the newest versions of the Focke-Wulf FW-190 and was pretty much the best-equipped Luftwaffe fighter group in the theater. He only spent a few months there, but you can tell he was really beginning to find his place, claiming 26 kills total between November 1942 and March 1943. Most of those claims came on just 2 days, actually, February 9th and February 15th, when he claimed 8 and 7 kills, one after the other. Well, by June, he was sent away to the Eastern Front, this time to command the newly formed 4th Group of Jagdgeschwader 54. Here, he really began to shine. On November 6, 1943, he claimed an amazing 13 kills in a single sortie, in a fight that lasted just 17 minutes. Up until his return to Germany in late 1944 to train on the Me-262 jet fighter, he claimed another 123 kills for a total of 136 in the East. In 1945 in the West, he flew the Me-262 while in command of 1st Group Jagdgeschwader 7 and claimed 12 more kills there, mostly heavy bombers, for a total of 86 kills against the Western Allies. That is 222 during the war. If we are keeping score, and we are, Rudorfer was not the highest-scoring ace against the Western Allies, though. That honor goes to Hans-Joachim Marseille. The Star of Africa was born December 13, 1919, in Berlin. The son of a career army officer, he entered the Luftwaffe in 1938. But right from the start, Marseille did not fit military discipline very well. He was a gifted pilot, but reckless, argumentative, and often in trouble with superiors who described him as bohemian. Now, in the meaning of that time, that word meant lazy, unreliable, and lacking proper respect. More than once, his career came close to ending before it had really begun, with his family name doing a lot of work when it came to keeping him from being discharged. Marseille saw his first combat during the Battle of Britain in 1940, flying the Messerschmitt Bf-109, which he would fly through his whole combat career, and his early performance was nothing special. He was shot down 4 times by the British, often because he had a habit of leaving his wingman and flying off alone. What his superiors did notice, though, was amazing hand-eye coordination and spatial awareness. So, an ace in the making, just needing a little help to guide that talent. Well, that came after his transfer to North Africa in early 1941, flying, with Jagdgeschwader 27, under the leadership of Eduard Neumann. Marseille sharpened his technique and began to use his natural talent. Neumann saw how good Marseille was, but knew he needed a gentler touch to bring out his best qualities, not hard and strict discipline to hammer him into shape. Unlike many Luftwaffe aces, Marseille did not depend on surprising his enemies by diving from above. Instead, he developed a very aggressive high-speed attack style, using flaps and throttle control and pushing his plane to the absolute limit to fight several enemies in each pass. In 1941 and 1942, Marseille was credited with 158 aerial victories, 151 of those against Allied aircraft in the Western Desert, mostly British Commonwealth and later American pilots. What makes Marseille stand out is not just the total, but the situation. His claims were made against well-trained opponents, flying modern planes in fairly clear skies, where overclaiming was harder to hide. His most famous achievement came on September 1st, 1942, when he was credited with 17 victories in a single day, including 8 in one sortie. At that point, it was an unmatched feat against the Western Allies. Maybe the most remarkable thing, though, was his marksmanship. The average fighter pilot was expected to use anywhere between 80 and 120 rounds of ammunition per kill, depending on skill and experience. So, how many did Marseille average? 60? 40? 15 rounds per kill. Crazy. Sadly for him and for the Luftwaffe, Marseille would not live to see 1943. On September 30th, 1942, the cockpit of his Bf-109 began to fill with smoke while he was returning from an escort mission. After his group got over friendly territory, he tried to bail out, but because he was almost blind, he could not tell that his plane was already in a dive. He left the cockpit and was pulled upward and backward by the air resistance, just as you would expect, right into the vertical stabilizer of his plane, the small fin at the top of the tail. The impact either killed him at once or knocked him unconscious, and he fell to the desert below. Our next hero, General of Fighters Werner Milders, died in a plane crash, but not in battle. In November 1941, World War I, German ace Udet, who, by then was the Luftwaffe Chief of Procurement and Supply, and was blamed again and again by Hermann Göring for all kinds of failures, took his own life, though the press said he died in a crash. And Werner Milders, as a passenger flying to the funeral, was killed when the plane crashed. Interestingly enough, when Milders transferred from Snorts the Army to the Luftwaffe in 1934, the doctor examining him told him, "You are not fit to fly. Music." He was very wrong. Though it took many months for Milders to get over his almost constant airsickness when flying. Even so, within a year of starting training, he was already an instructor. In 1938, Milders went to Spain to serve with the Condor Legion, supporting Franco in the Spanish Civil War. In July, he scored the first of his 14 Spanish aerial victories, the highest total of any German pilot there. But as good as he was as a pilot and shooter, and as a leader and organizer, probably his greatest achievement in that time was as a tactician. Together with a few of his fellow squadron pilots, he developed and put into use the Finger 4 fighter formation. The Finger 4 has been used by fighter pilots in air forces all around the world since the Spanish Civil War. After the end of the Second World War, the U.S. Air Force began calling the German-made Finger 4 the double attack system. You can look up for yourself exactly how the Finger 4 works. When World War II came, Milders kept adding to his kills. However, he himself was shot down over France and was taken prisoner, but he was released 2 weeks later when France surrendered. In October, he became the first of the new group of pilots to reach 50 victories. He passed the Red Baron's record of 80 kills on June 30, 1941, in the skies over the Soviet Union. And in mid-July, became the first pilot in history to reach 100. That achievement brought him the award of the Diamonds to his Knight's Cross, the first German soldier to be honored that way. With the award came an order from Reichsmarschall Göring clearly forbidding Mulders from flying any more air combat missions. He did keep flying them, but not often, and at the age of 28 he was appointed General of Fighters on August 7th. After that, he gave much of his time to developing the forward air controller idea, another groundbreaking idea he came up with. That is what he was doing before his fatal flight a few months later. Each morning he would fly over the front, land his plane, and hide in a foxhole, and then direct the incoming pilots over his radio toward enemy positions. In the evenings, he would fly back to base and make a daily report. These were no longer combat missions, but out-of-combat missions. Werner Mulders flew 330 of them, and he scored 115 aerial victories. I will end today with another general of fighters, but one who survived the war, Adolf Galland. Galland became general of fighters before he was 30. He is probably the only man to handle high command and be an ace at the same time. He meets the two basic tests of genius: the ability to look deeper and see farther than his own time, and the ability to turn that understanding into something practical. He will be remembered for a long time, not only for his fights in the air, but also for his battles on the ground as the voice of the fighter pilots in high councils, just as much as for his 104 confirmed aerial victories. I mentioned Galland several times in the regular series, especially when covering the Battle of Britain, when he was at odds with Luftwaffe boss Hermann Göring. Galland was, in fact, one of the few officers who stood up to Göring, and he and many of the other elite young officers felt that Göring's ideas about aerial combat and strategy were hopelessly out of date. Göring having been a flying ace in the Great War and being completely out of touch with aviation development. In the end, Göring would change course and clear the Luftwaffe of World War I-era leaders and pilots, but by then, that was only a bandage, not a cure. The Galland family had originally been French, but fled religious persecution in the 1700s and settled in Westphalia. Adolf was born in 1912 and, even as a teenager, flew gliders and then became a glider instructor. Then he was one of 20 out of several thousand applicants accepted at the Lufthansa School for Pilot Training, graduating in 1932. When he joined the Luftwaffe, though, he was hurt so badly in training that he was in a coma for 3 days, and his eye was injured badly enough then, and again in another crash, that he memorized the eye chart to pass his next physical. Like Werner Mulders, Galland flew for Franco in the Spanish Civil War. But unlike Mulders, he was not famous there, flying almost only ground support in outdated biplanes. The two men did become close friends there, and it was there that Galland first painted Mickey Mouse on the side of his plane. When asked why, he simply said, "I like Mickey Mouse. I always have." His experience in Spain was useful in Poland in 1939, earning him the Iron Cross Second Class. But Galland wanted to get away from ground support, so he faked an illness and got a doctor to say, "No more open cockpits for you." And from then on, he was a fighter, a hunter. In May 1940, he got the first of those 104 career kills, shooting down 3 British Hurricanes in one day. By October, he had won the Knight's Cross to his Iron Cross and the Oak Leaves, only the 3rd German soldier to be honored that way at the time. Galland had 2 brothers who also flew with the Luftwaffe, and both of them died in the war. Yet in 1941, he managed to survive being shot down twice in the same day. By 1944, as such a well-known pilot and leader, he was often blamed by Göring and even Hitler for Luftwaffe failures, and in January 1945, he was removed from his command. However, he was soon flying again, ending the war leading a squadron of Me-262s, The first operational jet fighter. Adolf Galland died in 1996 at the age of 83. So there you have it. 5 big names, maybe the big 5 of the German World War II flying aces. These men were also all quite different from each other in both actions, music, temperament, and style. But one thing you must take away from this episode, maybe the one thing, snorts, is that whatever honor, decency, or nobility these men may have had and may have shown, these 5 were personally responsible for many hundreds of deaths, possibly as many as 1,000. Because that is what happens in war. Many people are killed, and there is rarely anything decent about it. If you enjoyed this gallery special, well, we know you enjoyed this gallery special. But let us know in the comments, and maybe there will be more of them waiting for you. Who knows? But for even more great content from us, join us at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. That will do it. These are the newest commissioned officers in the Army, and Philip de Goy is the Army Member of the Week. See you next time.